Has there ever been a time where you haven't been pragmatic, or you've not been able to stick to it?
I usually can keep my pragmatic attitude, but now and then I feel, like for instance, there was a confrontation not so long ago with hunters here in the area, and I saw a person coming up on the meadow, and he had a gun, and I asked him, like, did you hunt? And he said, like, yeah, I was hunting. And I said, like, you backward dickhead or something. And he said, like, oh yeah, you probably don't eat meat, right? And I said, no, not in 25 years I've eaten meat. And I was so angry, and I went to stand very close to him, and he got like, seemed like afraid of me or something. I was shouting, I was screaming, and it was not pragmatic at all. But I felt good. And that is also the danger, because venting and blowing off steam and being very angry and seeing ourselves as the good guys and the other people as the bad guys, that can feel very, very good. And that's why we are tempted to do it, but it's not necessarily the best thing to do for animals.
He's saying it's comfortable to confront people, to confront violent people. I'm not sure what goes in this guy's head, but frankly, it annoys me more than I'd like to admit, truly. You know, I'd love to be more pragmatic or something. Which, as far as I've seen for him, is being cold and completely surrender to your own personal projections. Because frankly, how can confronting a violent person be something comfortable? It's not like that. So he says that standing fiercely for animals is not necessarily the best thing to do for animals, right? I understand that we shouldn't be like too violent because it doesn't make any good. But yeah, the way he says it, I think it's always like you should never like take the person out of their comfort zone. It's not only about aggression. Like most vegans who criticize aggressive vegans, it's more like don't confront at all. Don't say anything at all that makes the other uncomfortable, which is completely childish and ineffective for anyone to realize what they're doing wrong and get better. But yeah.
Right, we're going to be blunt now, because there's a lot of things said about you and some pretty harsh things said about you. So I'm curious to know how you'd respond to them. Some people would say that you're weakening this movement, the animal advocacy movement. They'd say that you are making veganism and the plight of the animals less urgent, less radical, and ultimately less effective. Do you agree?
Well, no, I don't agree. And first of all, I speak a lot about animals, and wherever it's appropriate, wherever I think it's going to be effective, I speak about the animals, and I emphasize the urgency. And I've been into this for 25 years, and I know how urgent it is, and it's my life. So if I know that something is not effective, or is watering down something, or is like to the disadvantage of the animals, I would never do it. Mm-hmm. I do these things because I believe they're good for animals. Mm-hmm. And
treating like someone could, like, you could suggest someone to reduce their oppression, and then you say you don't dilute a justice cause, a basic ethical principle of respecting someone's life and body and autonomy, and lack of power of informed consent. Really?
What I want to do is basically make this whole thing more accessible. People might see that as watering down or devaluing or whatever, but I think the problem is that we have an ideology that we want to seduce.
Confusing accessibility with watering down. No, it's the opposite. It's confusing watering down with accessibility. You know, we should never exploit animals. How is that inaccessible, saying that? You know, now check this out. But there are so many types of milk, you know, you can plan your diet like this and that for this reason and that, and all of that is veganism. So you make a whole bunch of stuff and you say that's more accessible for someone to understand respect for animals? Really? Also, let me just add something up. He already had an impulse of respecting animals from early in his life, like he said. He's not considering that most people don't have that. We should demand they have that. We should demand that they respect animals, even if they don't like animals or ever had contact with them. But he's more concerned about making people doing baby steps and never addressing the ethics. It's Jesus Christ.
You know, for most people, never eating animal products and then maybe also adopting political and ideological beliefs that we want them to accept, that is a tall order. That's a big ask. So you can compare it to like a club, and if the membership price is very high, there will not be very many people joining. So I'm in favor.
That's how veganism is treated most of the time, like a foodie club. That's exactly that. And it's ridiculous.
Of lowering the membership price a little bit so that we have more people that can join, so that we have a bigger movement that's not just this 1% of vegans that can participate, but many more people to form or to be a bigger weight on government, on industry and everything.
We will only have a considerable weight for any consistent change in the big scale, be it in the government or in the market. When we have more consistent vegans, not pass-by vegans, not occasional veggies. We have evidence for that. We have seen humans being increasingly vegetarians, ovo-lactose, reducing as fuck their consumption, and still isn't working because a lot of other people are increasing their consumption, increasing their exploitation, because nobody calls them out. Nobody says that's wrong. Very few people do that. And even among those who say they think this is wrong, but we shouldn't say, and all this, we call in Brazil politicagem. It's like this behavior of someone, a political figure to gain popularity, you know. Those changes will only happen with consistent vegans. We have very few consistent vegans. And how can we get them if we don't consistently advocate for animals and the respect needed for them and the compromise needed? Please tell me one change in any social movement, in any justice cause, for any group of victims that has been achieved without compromising serious activists who were screaming about their injustice, not only preaching about.
And part of you doing that is the kind of focus on reduction to make it more accessible, I suppose, and make it more doable for people to kind of join the animal advocacy world, right? Is to focus on reduction.
The theory behind reduction is also that, like, if there's many people reducing, this creates a lot of demand and this creates a lot of products, and it's because these products are there that it becomes easier and easier for everybody to go vegan. And if you today have a lot of, say, plant-based milks to choose from, they are there not because of the 1% vegans, they are there because a much higher percentage of people is drinking plant-based milks now and then for whatever reason.
Well,
so let's again, thinking he's speaking like a pioneer, talking of something that's been said for the last decades, and it's pure nonsense, because someone doesn't start respecting animals because now there's vegan mayo in their supermarket, okay? And like I said, increasingly more people are reducing, become ovo-lactose, strict vegetarians, and it's not working in that sense that he's saying it works. It is pragmatic. Never has. On the contrary, more animals have been exploited, you know, this period. And big scale configurations like the market or the laws, they are more of a consequence than the influence, but they are the influences in our lives, of course they are, and they are more of a consequence than an influence. It's pretty clear, people. If people don't start treating well those around them, those immediate around them, if I'm not a good person in my life, you know, and the other person isn't too, of course we will have a corrupt system in all the ways, economical and political. But if we treat and see each other well, we'll build something better. You know, we won't accept some kinds of politicians of politics, and the market will follow that too. They will supply us with what we demand, right? But if we don't demand anything, we just go with the flow, then there's nothing, of course. Unless we're talking about market fluctuations that happen with fashion, right? People think it's fashionable to be a vegan, so they turn into strict vegetarians for some period, and now a lot of people are doing it, so the market follows. But the point is, there are many people who like eating corpses and secretions, and so they also like the other stuff. So no, it's something that's there. And the point should be, if they take out these products off the market, how many people will keep just living out of veggies, of like a normal person who really has denied all the injustice against animals, right? So we're going to try to build a system that is very comfy for people to respect animals, or in our idea, because frankly, come on, it's not because someone buys oat milk they're respecting animals, you know. We have to, am I crazy? Feels like sometimes.
One major criticism of that I've seen a lot of times, this is probably the most common critique I've heard from people who disagree with promoting reducing eating animal products. They'll say, would you ever tell a racist or a slave owner to reduce by what they're doing? And then why would you tell people to reduce in this case then? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that we are comparing very different things, different in terms of social acceptance. Like, I mean, some people say, for instance, you would never have a child abuse free Monday, like you have a meat-free Monday, because that would say, like, it would like show that this child abuse is allowed on all the other days. And I think it's a very bad comparison, because you are comparing something that 99% of people disapproves of and is illegal, namely child abuse or slavery or whatever. You compare it with something that 95% of people celebrate, which is eating meat. And if you really think that you are treating these things at the same level, then why are you not in the supermarket slamming the meat out of people's hands as soon as they buy it?
Let's see, I've never seen in my life a vegan saying that child abuse is exactly the same thing as eating meat, because it obviously isn't. Like, cannibalism is not the same thing as child abuse, right? Two different things, but both are completely unfair. Both implies victimizing someone. And what Tobias doesn't seem to understand is that one thing is that you give a message to people that something is not wrong if you can do it 6 times a week. You're giving that message. You like it or not, you're giving it. And then he says 99% of people are against child abuse, which is a complete lie. I mean, even the rate of pedophiles must be higher than 1%. I'm only talking about that because there are so many degrees of child abuse and many people take part of it on it. And it's just like not realistic at all of him saying that. Then he poses an interesting question, a good question actually. Why don't we go to the supermarket slamming the meat out of people's hands as soon as they buy it? Because it wouldn't bring any good, really. We would be arrested, people would be more like resistant maybe, but I wouldn't crucify someone for doing that, I must say, at all. I wouldn't say that person is not a reason to be that pissed off and act like that. I would defend that person, actually. Maybe they will raise awareness by doing that. I'm not sure about that. Maybe they will bring some good that I don't expect. And Tobias, at that point, he doesn't acknowledge that. He doesn't acknowledge the possibility that a person doing that could be good, right? And at least wouldn't be like wrong, in my opinion. How? If I slammed a piece of dog meat of someone's hand, everyone would think I'm a hero. But the point is, the person would be arrested and nothing would happen. We must have more consistent vegans so our actions in that sense, our actions of resistance are really impactful, are really touching this basic structure of animal exploitation, you know, which he doesn't seem to.
Right? You're not doing that because you understand that public acceptance of that is completely different than with slavery. If you see somebody beating somebody else on the street, you will interfere, but not if you see somebody buying meat. So we accept that these things are different.
For the reasons I just posed, okay, but if you're just not assaulting people buying meat because of public acceptance, you're just being a coward, to be honest. You know, if you think like, oh, it's not that wrong because most people, you know. So most people don't do anything when they see a human going through an injustice too, right? Let's face it. I live in Brazil and not long ago, a black man was killed inside a supermarket, full. And then another black guy was killed in a beach daylight in Rio de Janeiro. And nobody did anything. People are not ethical about humans as well, you know. So that's the urgency of talking about ethics and demanding people to be ethical, to be consistent, not to be a bit better, and always be attentive to their mistakes, especially when their impact is wrong, is bad. I mean,
different. We accept that we have to use different strategies, different communications. We know that there's different norms about these things, around these things.
Another hot topic that comes up a lot with you is your...
We either treat veganism as a moral obligation or it isn't. Simple as that, you know. And if we treat as not an obligation, then we don't have anything to say, really. We don't have to say to someone that they should be vegan. It's like, yeah, if you want to. If you want to respect animals, that's fine. But he's not talking of respect of animals, right? He's talking about the dieting all the time.
Stance on, and this is the biggest one, even for me, this was a tough one actually to get my head around. It's your stance on social flexibility. You've suggested in the book, and I guess outside of the book again, that sometimes it could be better for a vegan to participate in eating a non-vegan meal in a social setting to avoid reinforcing the idea that veganism is difficult or exclusionary and these types of things. Isn't that just proving what people thought already, that animals are in fact food, the complete opposite of what we're trying to say? Mm-hmm. Or is it something else? And where's the line between strategy and hypocrisy? Mm-hmm. Is the question.
Yeah.
Really.
So the example I always give is like there's a person and they've cooked a meal and they're not vegan. They cooked a meal for you especially, and they looked up a recipe, etc. And they bought the ingredients and they made a lasagna, and the lasagna sheets, the pasta dough itself contains eggs. And you're there, you're sitting there, that's the only thing you can eat. They've put all this work in it. Are you going to eat it or are you going to refuse it? And I think in those circumstances, you do more damage by refusing it than by eating it. There's no animal going to be saved because you eat or you don't eat that lasagna.
I'm going to do what saves animals. Unless you're literally saving animals, rescuing animals, you're not saving animals. Put that in your mind. You don't save children because you're respecting children. You don't save animals because you're respecting them. You must understand that. You know, it's not about saving them, it's about respecting them now. And then he says something absurd like that, like again with his crystal ball, and saying someone should like be flexible and put some oppression into their bodies because to not make the other feel bad, because that would cause more damage. How on earth, you know? And if it wasn't very clear on the last question, on the last answer of his, now it's like blatant, clear how he thinks of public acceptance as a criteria, as metrics for efficiency. And it's so absurd to think like, we're not talking about a selling strategy. Maybe actually he is for a fact, but veganism is not. It's about ethical education. It's about justice. And it's not comfy. And if you gain too much popularity talking of those things, too much popularity, it has a great risk that you're reinforcing status quo and saying things that make oppressors feel comfortable. So that's why you're gaining that popularity. That's the problem. I'm not saying someone can't be popular talking of uncomfortable truths and making oppressors accountable. They can, but it's rare, and it's very rare in this movement.
But you are going to have a big impact on that other person who might say like, oh my God, this is so difficult, I could never do this, I'm not going to ever invite this guy again, etc. I mean, possibly. There's also other outcomes that are possible.
Like, just because someone gets pissed at you, it doesn't mean that they're gone, they're lost, I've seen so often people getting pissed at one point and then, you were right, man. I thought about it. I thought about why I got pissed at you even. I've seen it happen. It's so immature, so childish to assume that when you make someone feel uncomfortable, you're making them go away. They will go away if they want to. You're making them uncomfortable or not. I mean, if you make them too comfy, then you probably then be corrupt as well. And why you're making that, you know, it doesn't make any sense. His appeal to acceptance, to public acceptance, is depressing actually. So it's so childish, this idea that if I am making someone uncomfortable, I'm making them go worse. You know, I'm making that person go away. They will go away if they want to, but you must tell them the truth. Is that purity? Being honest?
But the important thing here is that, again, this is a matter of pragmatism. Suppose I ask you, what if you absolutely, definitely knew that this situation, if you refuse the lasagna, would be damaging, would set animals back a little bit? Would you still stick to your principles? My answer to that is my principles are...
Hypothesis doesn't mean nothing, doesn't mean shit. Honestly, why? How could someone say that? If something will be damaging for another, will you monitor? Will you stalk that person to see if they it doesn't make any sense.
Are reducing animal suffering. My principle is not
suffering. That's not veganism. That's welfareism. Anyone who has studied this movement and animal rights movement or the animal exploitation history, anyone who did that for an hour knows he's talking about welfareism, not veganism, you know, and he himself doesn't acknowledge that, doesn't or admit that, and even launches a fucking book talking wrongfully about the movement that he appropriated.
Eating a certain way. So I'm still consistent with the outcome that I see, which is helping animals. And if this thing helps animals, I want to do it. And I have to add to that.
Please, Tobias, show us that. Show us how animals are being saved by but that millennia-old strategy that you're claiming to be yours just because you call it pragmatic. And you think just by calling it pragmatic, it is, while it is completely based on your personal projections of making people comfortable and taking step to an ethical revelation, or what? Or there isn't an ethical revelation at all, right? They just get to be trained to be strict vegetarians, and then they will be concerned about animals. How is that? How can you put like a cake recipe to something like that, to a transformation of mindset and behavior to the core? Jesus Christ, it's so...
That this also in my case only goes so far. In case there would be meat in that lasagna, I wouldn't do it. So it's also a matter of like, disgust and what you're used to. And I'm not saying to people like to like, go out of their comfort zone too much. They don't have to do that, but just think about
eating meat, a vegan eating meat, to not make the other animal oppressor feel bad. He says that's going out of your comfort zone. It's not betraying your principle, your ethical duty and sense. No, it's just stepping out of the comfort zone. It's appalling.
Why am I doing it? What would happen if I broke the rules this time? I always encourage people to think beyond this rigidity and to think beyond like the rules that we have.
He calls basic morals rules all the time. Yeah, sure, you can call like don't steal, don't rape, like rules. But can you understand that those rules are very basic? It's not like about an opinion. It's just this much of common sense.
And to think beyond like the rules that we have, and that maybe we, once we became vegan, never questioned anymore.
I imagine someone in the comments or watching the videos shouting this at the screen right now, just to say, but by you eating that, you and this person isn't a vegan or a vegetarian, or assumedly, then the next day, the meal that you ate that they could have eaten, they're going to replace with another animal product, which means another trip to the store, which means actually it did potentially cause. Did you consider that?
I mean, you can always think of situations where it would matter or it wouldn't matter. I think it's more likely that the effect on this person, and you can fill it in with another person who's very important and you shouldn't turn off. how are you going to get them along, take them along with you? And maybe the best way is to be principled. But one important meta issue here is if people...
I mean, he's losing character. I know. All this time and now he says maybe the best thing is to be principled. I mean, maybe the best thing is to respect innocent beings and consistently talk for them when using the word created for them. At this point, I don't think he really... I'm pretty sure he doesn't acknowledge veganism is much more than what we eat, about what we eat. And actually it's actually what comes before that. And that not only affects our dieting, but everything we do and how we relate to animals.
If people like me say something like this, don't think it's just to like, I don't know,
appease people.
Yeah, no. I mean, this thought experiment is not just to like, not because I'm not a real vegan or because
that's what I'm getting at. People will assume negative intent. They're like, oh, you're just trying to please people. You're just trying to be an easy.
No.
Oh, not that kind of vegan.
Or
like
it's for to get attention or to get clicks or whatever. No, it's just to make us think. And to see if there's sometimes better ways to help animals than the ways we think are the most obvious ones.
Okay, I've got one more question for you, but before...
The most obvious ways are exactly the ones they preach. To ask people to reduce a bit, reduce anything, please do anything. That's the most common way of people negotiating animal exploitation and slavery, by just promoting some welfare measure that only legitimates their exploitation in a good manner. And he's just preaching about something that's been said and been promoted for millennia and has countless, endless evidences of not working, of how those measures, those strategies he talk about are the same strategies used by the very industry that exploits animals to make animal exploitation more feasible, more acceptable, and it's appalling to me how people put themselves to write and publish books without doing the proper research to acknowledge that, because those are facts, people. I'm not saying I think welfareism doesn't work. I think asking people to reduce doesn't work. It's there. It's history,
For you, but before we get to it, I want you to tell people where we can find you. Is there anything you want to promote, and what are your links? And
I blog at Tobias.
That I won't say anymore, because frankly, that's enough, right? That's it, people. I'm genuinely sad and hurt because of this, David was someone that I liked in the past, but in the last months or so, I've seen him like going into this whole world that treats veganism as a market strategy, right? As a popular thing, as a foodie club, and he's always posed like a radical vegan in the sense of being radically against animal oppression, and because people need to stop seeing them as commodities. We need to focus on that, because people are already in general against animal suffering and cruelty. And that's why they pay other people to do that, because they care, they're childish. They're sensitive to it, but they don't want to look, and they're just, because I don't care animals are commodities. I'll just pay someone to do that for me. And that's the problem. And we must be more honest, open, and break the fucking taboo of talking of uncomfortable things and necessary things, of accountability. We can't make any group of oppressors get better without making them aware of what they are doing and of what is preventing them to be fair to animals. And that's not comfy. And I totally agree, we must find a common ground, and and we must talk even to oppressors from a place of empathy if we want to change, if we want to help them change. I'm completely with that, but I'm not with that childish, silly notion of empathy where you just give comfort to people. No, that's not real empathy, that's not real love, because you're trivializing what animals go through and went through. through thousands of years, you know. So yeah, that's my first react, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope it clarify things, give some people ideas, new ideas, because those ideas Tobias and they are talking about, they're not new at all. They are the oldest ones on the book, and they've proven to be wrong as fuck. Not only ethically, logically, but also in consequences, you know. And all it takes is to study a bit, to be really humble and study about the movement and the history you're taking part of.